So is it possible to make a business out of working to restore the climate where you're funded by investment and profit rather than credits, grants or government funding? Seafields is one of a growing number of startup companies developing technologies and strategies to do just that.
My name's John Auckland. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Seafields. Seafields is a carbon mitigation business that's going to grow huge amounts of floating seaweed for two purposes: to provide alternative feedstocks to industry that are otherwise used by intensive fossil fuel production, and also for carbon removal, where we will sink the biomass remains of the seaweed to the deep ocean, where the embodied carbon will then be stored for geological timescales. The idea was first brought to me by Victor Smetacek, who's an esteemed biological oceanographer, and he was being interviewed. And this interview just blew my mind. It changed my world, and it made me realise that this needed to be my life's work. I'm not ashamed to say that I've been suffering from climate anxiety for a number of years, to the point where I seriously considered whether I wanted to have kids and what kind of future I was going to be giving to them. My background is in helping startups, mainly in the impact space, to raise money and to launch themselves to the world. So you can imagine the kind of amazing business ideas that we get through these sort of channels. And you know, they were doing good in the world, but I didn't see which one was going to really solve the problem on a grand scale, and that made me really, really anxious. And then when I saw the Seafields idea, that's the first time I really felt like hopeful again, like I could do something about this. Seafields is a relatively simple concept. It's this idea of growing floating macroalgae. Macroalgae are seaweeds, essentially. Growing them in the open ocean where we have a huge amount of space. So Seafields harnesses that seaweed, it controls it, domesticates it, it cultivates it, harvests it, it separates the liquid from the solid. Once we've separated the liquid from the solid, the liquid is quite valuable in its own right. That can be sold as a commercial biostimulant. This helps plants be more healthier, have stronger roots. It helps improve soil health. So that's obviously quite attractive in today's agricultural environment where soil health is deteriorating and we need to grow more crops. The solid biomass then can be stored for quite a long time before it's decided what happens with that. Or alternatively, if it's not turned into a product, that's when we then sink it into chosen sites over 4,000 meters in the deep abyssal plain. Abyssal plain is kind of red clay that can go on for thousands and thousands of kilometers in all directions and has very little life down there. You know, people have this conception that trees are a really good place to store all the carbon. Trees are very vulnerable. They're still in the fast carbon cycle. If you have a forest fire, that carbon gets re-released back into the atmosphere. So we're using the power of nature, of photosynthesis in a very similar way to growing trees, to lock the carbon from the atmosphere via photosynthesis embodied into the biomass of the seaweed plant. Once we've extracted some of the valuable nutrients and other materials, baled it tightly into these sort of compact bales, then there's very little chance that they're going to decompose on the seafloor. So the sediments will build up around them, and over time they will then get turned again back into oil. We're almost reverse engineering that process that created the oil in the first place.